Hello. Hello, I'm Pastor Joe. Welcome to Bethany Church. We're a place for real faith, real life, and real people. We're in the process of discovering for ourselves how we can love God more and love our world more. And we'd love to help you take the next steps in your journey as well. We hope that this message and the ministry of Bethany Church helps you grow in your faith and your walk in relationship with your family, your work, and your world. If you'd like to find out more about Bethany Church, about what it is, what we're up to, and how it can maybe be of part of your faith journey, check us out at bethanyschofield.org. Today we're continuing our journey into Daniel, a man that thrived in Babylon. He didn't just survive in Babylon. He didn't just make it through a pagan, broken culture. He thrived in it. There's truth and there's life that we can find from that. Before we look into God's word, let's pray together. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for your word. I thank you how it speaks in our lives. It gives us the truth we need for life. I pray that we would be people that would seek your face, that would honor you. And Lord, we give you this time. I pray you'll help us lay aside the distractions, the thoughts, all the things that could get us off track, and help us just to focus on you, the author and finisher of our faith. Thank you and praise you for it. In Jesus' name, amen. In Daniel chapter 1, God puts Daniel in a difficult predicament. He is in a challenging spot. And he also gives Daniel the elements and the faith he needs to navigate through it. We will see in Daniel chapter 1 how believers can follow their Lord and Savior and be given the faith to start their faith journey, continue it on, but finish it as well. If you have a Bible, I'd invite you to turn to Daniel chapter 1. We'll look into this passage together. Daniel chapter 1. We're going to read the entire chapter. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of the court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among these were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned you your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men your age? The king would have my head because of you." Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and understanding. And Daniel could understand the visions and dreams of all kinds. At the end of time set by the king to present them and bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in this whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading and study of his word. This last week, I used my GPS on my phone. I had to go to an appointment down in Stevens Point. I ended up at a parking lot that, at least when I got there, looked a little like this one. People were parking all over the place, and it was a mess. The GPS got me. The GPS had the information and the direction to get me to the vicinity. But at that point, I had to use my mind and find the right parking spot to go to. I didn't want to get parked in. I wanted to make it to my appointment in time. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a parking lot just up the street and across the road. Now, I was there to see my son run in a track meet, and that's why I was there. The craziness of the parking was all these crazy parents, and you probably have seen these people. But anyways, my son's race was just about to start, and the parking lot was way over here. So I didn't know what else to do, but I just parked my car far away and booked it. I ran as fast as I could. In the nick of time, right before my son was to race, I saw him run the 4x800 relay. That story, that picture of the GPS giving us our intellectual understanding to know what to do, but combined with common sense to know what to do in the moment, is a picture of what I see God gave Daniel, and he gives all of his people, what God gives believers in this test of faith that we live in. If you read Daniel 1 verse 17, I love this verse. This is a powerful verse and one we could hang on to. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding in every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meanings of visions and dreams. If you read that first verse, the first part of the verse, it says there, an unusual aptitude for understanding. But really, the discernment, the second part of that, every aspect of literature and wisdom, that really means common sense. God gave his people, in that context, the wisdom of how to navigate their world. But he also gave them discernment or common sense in the midst of it. As we go through this life, we are living in a fallen world, in a fallen culture, in a broken world, and tests come our way. And I believe that God not only allows them, sometimes he sends tests our way, but he also gives us the wisdom and the discernment of what we might do next. These tests, these challenges that we face along the way are the very thing that can build our faith and help us grow into maturity. Let's look into how Daniel, living in a pagan culture, grew in his faith and became what God made him to be. The example of Daniel is the example for us. First of all, evil is everywhere. Evil is everywhere. In this account, we read just how horrible and corrupt and bad things had gotten for the people of Israel. While this story was composed and written 2,600 years ago, the relevance of evil being everywhere still rings true today. This book, while it is ancient, is still relevant because it speaks to the heart of people living in that kind of a culture. Well, the first thing we see there is this. During the 3rd year of Jehoiakim's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over Jehoiakim and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said. Make sure they are well versed in every branch of learning, are gifted with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They would be trained for 3 years and then would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were the 4 young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chief of staff renamed them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belteshazzar, Hananiah called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. We see a new view, and not the one that they wanted in this. Nebuchadnezzar was exercising brilliant control over the people. He took the best and the brightest, basically took them as captives, made them into refugees into his land. To hold authority over Judah, he took the best out of their country and took them to his own country, knowing they wouldn't rebel if their own children were back in a foreign land. Evil people, they're just can be incredibly smart, incredibly brilliant. I think the picture we have sometimes of the evil in this world, it's like the cartoons I remember watching, that the bad guys in the cartoons were so foolish, they would do silly things that would blow themselves up instead of getting their enemy. That's not the enemy that we face. The enemy that we face in this day and age is something like Nebuchadnezzar. Brilliant, astute, and many times there seems like there's no way out. We'll see what he does. He gives them new names. Daniel, which means God is judge, becomes Belshazzar, meaning Bel, the Babylonian god. Bel, protect his life. He was given a new name reflecting the culture and the people and the beliefs of who they were serving. It's as if he was saying, your God didn't do anything for you back there. I'm going to give you a new name. They were trying to infiltrate and get into his mind, even to the very personal things of his name. And that's what the enemy many times does. He's not just something that's far out there doing something out there in this nebulous evil. The enemy's attacks can be incredibly personal. They can get right down into the very heart of who we are, the identity of how we find ourselves. The other men were given similar names. They were switched from godly names to Babylonian evil names, reflecting the gods of their age. They're giving a new education, including an education in the occult. It was a re-education camp, but not your summer Bible camp. They're given a new menu. They were given food off the king's table, not kosher, against their beliefs, and it probably had been offered to another god. The wine and the food offered at that time probably would have been offered to idols. So these young men, far from family, far from friends, far from the world, were planted in this culture with new names, a new education, and new food. This is a terrible, difficult, horrible situation. And while not all the parallels are the same, we don't have kosher laws and we aren't necessarily given new names. The enemy is incredibly good at getting very personal in his attacks, removing us from the support structures like family that used to be able to support us in it, making it easier to partake in the evil of this world than to go back to the good things that we should have. I think of the entertainment and the devices and the things that we see, everything around us, it's catering towards a pagan world and not God's world and not God's way. This is all that's going on. At this point, Daniel must have asked his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, must have asked, God, what are you doing? Have you ever had that question? Has the question crossed your mind? God, where is your control? Where is your hand? The evil are doing this. And yet, this is what we see. At the very beginning of the book, Daniel 1 verse 2, we're told that Daniel wrote this, and the Lord delivered Jehoiakim into Nebuchadnezzar's hand. from the very beginning of the book, from the second verse all the way to the end, Daniel believed that God's hand was into and everything. When the Lord is behind everything, it changes everything. The very perspective that Daniel had in that moment as a teenager, probably 15 or 16 years old, is the same mindset that got him through all the challenges. As we go through this book, what we're going to see time and again is that Daniel trusted in a great God that didn't just allow things, he caused things to happen. And if you believe that God that is overall, is behind everything and is behind things going on right now, it gives us the basis, the foundation by which we move forward. God is in control of who is in control. I'd like you to just, if you have a pen and paper, write that down. God is in control of who is in control. Whoever you think is in control, God is in control of them. Now, are they being righteous and living the right way? Are they following God's commands? Probably not. But I believe with all my heart that what was going on in Daniel's world is going on in ours. He is still in control of whoever is in control. From Putin and that crazy guy in North Korea, to your boss, to your family member that's manipulative, and everything in between. God is in control. That's where this starts. This faith that we will see in Daniel throughout this book and his life goes back to a belief, unshakable, stern belief that God is in control of who's in control. Well, if things are bad and things are getting worse, and even if God is in control, how do believers act? Daniel shows us in different ways his different approaches, and we'll see this first approach is brilliant in how Daniel approached this world. So Daniel's got a dilemma. Daniel's dropped squarely into this circumstances that are impossible. His family's far away. He's being given a new name, a very personal attack. He's being re-educated. We know for at least 3 years he's doing this. He's getting non-kosher, this food that's coming at him. And by the way, who would have known what food he was eating? No one would have known. No one would have known all these things were happening. But the story changes in this. I'd like you to read verse 8. But Daniel was determined to not defile himself by eating the food and wine given to him by the king. Daniel and his overcoming his situation began. The switch changed when he determined he would do the right thing. Now, at this point, he knows God is in control of who's in control, but God has not entered into the circumstances yet. The reason why Daniel is written about is it starts with Daniel had a certain amount of faith to say, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know what I'm going to necessarily do, but somehow, in some way, God will provide. I'm going to do the right thing. He determined, he resolved, I will do the right thing. And that's what we see in this entire thing. And it's interesting to me what he does. He doesn't protest his name. At least we don't see that. He does keep his name in the book, but his friends do not. He doesn't protest the education he's in, but he does protest the food he ate. And the way I see it, this is what I believe. I believe he knew what his name was. No matter what people called him, he knew where he stood with God, and God is my judge was never going to change. He knew that no matter what education they brought on him, it doesn't change what he believed. You can learn new things without believing those new things. And Daniel was determined to believe what he believed, no matter what he was educated. But he couldn't eat the king's food because he knew that would be disobedient. That would be ingesting and taking in what God said is wrong. So Daniel is determined. Daniel's determined. That the story begins to change because of Daniel's determination about what he's doing. The problem with the cafeteria, the problem with the king's cafeteria, is that he would be ingesting and going against God's command. And so at that point, Daniel spoke up. He began to speak out against what was going on. and he spoke up wisely. Now, Daniel didn't just live his life. We read in the story that he spoke up. He said to the chief official, I can't go there. I'm going to do something different. I can't live this way. Not outspoken, not a public profession, which would have caused the official to have to raise the stakes and have to win. He came alongside the man, and instead of assaulting him verbally, said, listen, can we find another way? And this is where we see God give his first thing, the first thing that God gave him. And it wasn't transporting Daniel back to Judah. It wasn't giving him, causing all the people to die. God could have done all those things, all the things you can imagine. God could have transported him back, could have made him king over the land, wiped out the Babylonians. There's so many things he could have done, but God instead gave him favor. Have you ever noticed that sometimes in life, what changes and what matters in life is not these momentous big things. It's sometimes just a small thing. It's determination to do the right thing. It's finding favor with the right person. It's out of the corner of your eye, noticing something that you've been missing before. It's reading your Bible and being reminded of a truth. These little things is how God many times works. Look for the little things for God to speak in it. And so he goes to this man, and believe it or not, the story goes bad. This man that Daniel has favor with says no. So at this point, you'd say, well, what are we going to do? But Daniel doesn't take no for an answer. He finds a workaround. He wasn't necessarily disobedient in his culture, but he found a workaround. The wisdom that he needed, combined with the common sense to navigate the way, was about to come out. Daniel goes to the next person in charge. And what you see in his approach to reaching this man is absolutely brilliant. I'd like you to notice what he does. First of all, it didn't go his way. But he didn't take that for the final answer. He realized he's got to do something. So what did Daniel do? Daniel considered the common ground that both him and the guy right in charge of him both needed and wanted. In the end, the man's job was not to make sure he ate the king's food. The man's job was to make sure he grew stronger and, physically was able to handle what was going on. And Daniel had no problem with that. Getting stronger and more physically fit was not Daniel's problem. So he suggested to the man, instead of eating the king's food, can we go around the other way? His approach in the conflict of not wanting to compromise his morals led him to say, can we find another way? His intelligence and his common sense comes through, and they come up with a solution. And they arrive at a mutually beneficial thing. This man agrees, yeah, you're right. You're right, Daniel. I don't need you to eat the king's food. I just need to be stronger and healthier. Okay, let's try it. And Daniel gave him a reasonable time frame, 10 days, to try it out. So Daniel didn't compromise. And at this point in time, it's the first time that we see that his peers, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, get pulled in on it. Now, were they part of the discussion? Were they part of figuring out how to do this? We don't know for sure, but they definitely joined into the food plan that Daniel had laid out. One lesson I can see out of this, it's incredibly beneficial for believers to align yourself with other people seeking to live out their faith. Even in Babylon, hundreds of miles from family, in a pagan culture, re-education, there are people seeking to do the right thing in the right way. Don't think that you're on your own, but do keep your eyes open for those that are seeking to live out their faith. Now, Daniel seems to have been the spokesperson. He was the one that was outspoken, but I'm sure Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had their own gifts that they brought into this, and they definitely had a mutual strength that came with being together on this. The result? The result in all this, the 4 young men stood up. Now, one thing I'd like to note, there's a miracle that's here. Everybody around the table, the king's cafeteria, was eating meat and wine. Alcohol has a lot of calories, and the meat definitely does as well. Daniel and his peers were eating vegetables and drinking water. And for the first time in the history of the earth, people eating vegetables and water gained more weight than the people eating off the king's cafeteria. The word that it uses to describe Daniel and his friends is they actually got fatter. That has never happened before. But God was in it. God was in it. Now, I'm not saying that by eating broccoli or you can make God do or anything like that. What I truly believe, though, and I've seen this in my own life, is if God is calling you to a certain result, like you believe with all your heart God is calling you to a certain result, He will also provide the means, the resources, and the way out of it. Now, it's interesting to me, if you read the book of Esther, you don't get the impression at all that Esther was following Daniel's diet and Daniel's plan. And by the way, they would have been at a similar time in a similar culture. Yet God bless Esther and God bless Daniel. I guess I would make sure to I would like to highlight at this moment, God gives wisdom and common sense, and sometimes what He gives for one person might be different for another. Don't necessarily put all of your values that you hold to someone else. Maybe God's calling them to a different direction and a different path. So the lesson here is that Daniel stepped out in faith, and he did it with his friends. He navigated a tricky, difficult situation, and God honored his faith. God came through for them. Determine with wisdom to obey God's command. Without belligerence, without making fun or light of another person, determined to live out God's command. And the last thing we see here is that Daniel had strategic serving. Daniel and his peers, by that first initial start, were given a platform. They passed that first test, and God gave them what they needed through pluck, through understanding, through common sense, helped them overcome. And what we see in the next chapters in the book of Daniel, that God continued to move and cause and bring about through them and their life His result, His will, and their faith and their story grew. The strategic serving didn't end in Daniel chapter 1, and their approach as well didn't stay the same. It will change. As we go through this book, we'll see his approach, Daniel and his friends' approach to living in the pagan culture would adjust to the times. But they were given wisdom and understanding to do it. So what does God give? Part 2. We're told that God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude for understanding. Both book smart and life smart. What God gives wisdom and skill in books and in life. He gave them both this twofold understanding, not just intelligent IQ, but emotional intelligence or people intelligence. You'll see them as they navigate through this. When they would stand strong and be right in the face of some, and they would go into the background and find their way around in others. God gave them both, and God still gives those things for life. This is what He does. So Daniel and his fellow men served. Just remember, they're serving and living in a pagan culture. This would be a difficult proposition. They were at the height of a pagan, ungodly government. And yet this is the exact same way that God used and worked through them. God still does this today. He puts people in strategic positions to accomplish His purpose. God is in control of who is in control. You can trust and count on that He's still doing that. We'll see throughout this book that the young men served, but they didn't compromise. To serve and to do what we're called to do in this world does not require compromising to the morals of this world. but at the same time, the challenge wasn't over. It would take wisdom and understanding, both like intellectual smart, but common sense smart, to navigate the situation. The result of all this is we need to interpret and look into our world and filter it through God's filter. We still have the strength and we still need to do these things. There's a parallel verse I'd like to remind you of. In James 1 verse 5, it tells us, does any of you lack wisdom? Ask God, and he'll give generously without finding fault. The same kind of world that Daniel lived in, we do as well. The challenge, the difficulty, the struggle, we still have that. Ask God for wisdom. God gave favor with some leaders at that time to Daniel, and later God gave Daniel and his friends wisdom and understanding to navigate this life. We need that same wisdom and understanding. It starts with faith, determining to do the right thing, and then inviting God to give us the wisdom and understanding to get through this world. In this world, we will face challenges, but God gives us what we need to live by faith. On the big picture, the big things going on, but also in the little things, the day-by-day decisions to navigate and get through this life. Are you facing a challenge in this life? Are you being pushed to compromise, to give up your morals? God can give you the strength, the will, and the wherewithal to get through these things. I urge you, do not compromise. Stand strong in your faith, but then invite God at the same time. Invite God to give you wisdom on how to do that. He will give generously without finding fault. Some next steps as you approach this and apply this week. First of all, determine to trust God to supply exactly what you need. Pause right now. What is a challenge? What are you going through? What is a person, a place, a situation you're going through where you don't have what it takes? Ask God to supply exactly what you need. Ask him to give it. He gives generously his wisdom without finding fault. Next, determine to be obedient to God and his word. He makes clear in his word how to live. He gives us truth to live by. He is speaking today through his word into our hearts and lives about what we should be and can be about. Listen to that word. Dig into this book on your own time and ask God, help me understand. I would urge you, as we're going through the book of Daniel, read the book of Daniel, but then also read the book of Esther. Next week, we'll be looking at chapter 2. Read Daniel chapter 2. They may very well give insights, not only to the message next week, but how it applies to your life. And finally, determine to be wise in your response. Daniel didn't stand on the corner and yell at the official, I can't do that. No, he wisely proceeded into his predicament, and God used that to bring him to the very heights of power. God might be preparing you through the challenge you're facing right now for the greater challenge and greater opportunity down the road. Determined to be faithful and determined to be wise. Ask God for the strength and wisdom you need, and he'll provide. God gave these 4 young men an unusual aptitude or understanding for every aspect of literature and wisdom. This is what we needed then, and it's what we need now. Would you close with me? To him who is able to keep you from falling and to present you before his glorious presence without fault and with great joy. To the only God our Savior be glory, majesty, power, and authority through Jesus Christ our Lord, before all ages, now and forevermore. Dear Lord, I pray that you give us the strength, the wisdom, the wherewithal, the things we need to live by faith in this world. Praise you and thank you, Lord, that you did that through Daniel and you're doing that today. Let us be people that seek to honor, live, and build up your name. Help us to trust in you in the little things. And Lord, as the small challenges we face now, the smaller challenges we face now could lead to greater ones down the road. But help us to remember the faith and the insight, the wisdom needed for now is the same same God that can supply what we need for later. Help us to trust and hope in you. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless, and seek his wisdom and determine to follow his will this week.